Get ready to quit the build.
Here we go.
The QTB crew is rounding up all the gaming news and hot topics of the week with a little extra something. And here are your hosts, Bruno and Nick.
What it do? Welcome to the QTB podcast. We're so glad you could join us. My name is Bruno, and with me, as always, is my childhood friend and co-host, Nick. I like to call him Long Branch Penny Whistle. How you doing, bud?
I'm pretty sure at this point you're just going to like a Dungeons and Dragons like name generator and just rolling the dice and that's what I get. Yeah.
That's actually what I should do. That's what we should do. We should just have a name generator that just comes up with one. Well, listen, in the future we're definitely going to need one because I'm going to run out of names eventually.
I would hope so.
I'm going to run it. I've got a list. I got a list here, huge list of names that we're going to call you every episode. And one of these days I'm going to run out. So if you have a list of a great name generator out there, then send it our way. You can always send us stuff. If you have anything that you want to say to us, you can send it via quitthebuild.com. And we have had some really interesting articles on there recently. Brad, our resident beer connoisseur, posted an amazing article today on the 6 great beer-inspired or video game-inspired beers.
Yeah.
Right? And apparently it's SF Beer Week for all you Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area people out there, or just California people in general. There's going to be great beer showcase throughout all this week. And later on this week on the podcast, we're going to have Brad to talk about some other beer stuff and, all that good stuff. What do you think?
I think we need to officially give Brad the job title of beer correspondent for QTB.
Ooh, I like that.
I think he needs to print that business card as soon as possible because this man knows his stuff. But yeah, definitely check that out. I do want to point out, and because just of when this podcast is going to be airing on Wednesday, that, depending on when you listen to it, you may get exposed to that Nintendo Direct that's coming out. It's the first mainline, official, first-party game Nintendo Direct that we've had since mid-2019, because they don't announce these things very far in advance. Sometimes you can find out about it the same day. So, yeah, we will definitely be giving our reactions to those games. We're expecting a lot of big reveals to happen because Nintendo has been playing it kind of close to the vest, especially with series games like Breath of the Wild 2 that we know is supposed to be coming up, and maybe even a new Smash character reveal if we're lucky.
Ooh, that'd be nice.
That'd be awesome. So, yeah, definitely make sure to tune in to Saturday's podcast as well, and we will be giving you our reactions to all of the, I'm hoping, very cool announcements that come our way. But aside from that, everything's good, man. Happy to be here with you for another episode.
Yeah, definitely. And we have a great episode in store for everyone today. But before we get started, today's podcast was sponsored in part by Pierce Unlimited. For marketing media that works and bespoke design to power your business, visit pierceunlimited.com. Nick, we've been killing it on the ratings game. Our listeners out there have been dropping some sweet ratings on Apple Podcasts because we're going to be giving away a nice video game merch set from Pierce Unlimited at the end of this month and subsequently every month that we're doing a podcast, which is from now until our deathbeds, obviously.
We're in for life.
We're in for life. We've signed contracts in blood over an animal sacrifice. It was very awkward. The animal in question was a worm because that's all we could find on short notice out in the middle of the woods at night. Yeah. And we didn't really want to, we're not really into animal harming and we didn't want PETA on our backs or anything like that. But it's in blood.
Yeah.
So just so you guys know, we're not going anywhere. We're going to be here. We're going to be giving you the news. Speaking of news, what do we got in store for the lovely people today, Nicholas?
Well, I'm so glad you asked because we have got some very interesting articles to talk about today. Actually, one of which I posted there on our Reddit account, Quit the Build -podcast, that I got a lot of input from my fellow Redditors about, which is a really great way to kind of involve the community with our conversations, I think, about the news. And we'll get into that one a little bit later, that's about how there has been a new lawsuit, a class action lawsuit, opened up against Sony about controller drift, which means that now all of the big three players, Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony, are now caught up in these, ongoing class action lawsuits. A lot to talk about with that one. And also later, we have another indie spotlight segment with some guys that I met. Yeah, I mean, we keep lining them up. These guys are DevHour Games, and I got a chance to talk to them about their upcoming game called Loveland, which is let's say the premise of the game for a horror experience is unique to say the least. Yeah. So we'll be had a chat with them, and but the first thing that we're going to talk about is all about Valheim, this upcoming game that, we have seen viral games in our time, that story of that come from behind release of a title that everybody starts playing and it peaks, and then some manage to capitalize on its success, some kind of fall by the wayside, right? We talked about how Fall Guys kind of had a big launch and never really quite had a hook or content releases that kept people playing. Not to say that it's a dead game, but no one's talking about Fall Guys today like they were many months ago.
These are hard truths, very, very hard pills to swallow.
Yeah, but Valheim is definitely having its time in the spotlight, and this is an article from PCGamer.com about how it's essentially at this point, it is Steam's biggest viral hit ever. This is an early access game, and it's already sold more than 2 million copies, which is nuts because I remember just like a couple days ago, the story breaking that it had sold 1 million copies. And that was a milestone. It's like, oh, we just doubled it. Yeah. Out of nowhere. So, when this article was created, which is just yesterday, there were 370,000 concurrent players on Steam and rising every single day. Everybody is talking about this game, and especially for something that's in early access and is as robust and kind of fleshed out as it is in that state. It's definitely a very cool thing to see a game like this really get some traction early on. What do you think?
So for those of you who don't know what Valheim is, because I certainly didn't until somebody posted this article on Quit the Build, which was, I believe Brad posted it. And it really kind of drew my attention to it. Like, wow, you've got 2 million people talking about a game and I haven't even heard of it. It must have come on the scene very quickly. And that's definitely the case. Well, first of all, with a name like Valheim, like that's a cool name. So I'm already on board with the name. I feel like, I don't know, that's like a sounds like a Viking type thing. And that's kind of what it is. It's got this like World of Warcraft feel to it. Like it looks like that when you kind of go on to watch it on Twitch or something. Yeah. If you end up playing it, it has this World of Warcraft feel. And it looks pretty interesting. I didn't really know what I was watching, and apparently that seems to be a problem with a lot of people. Like there seems to be a learning curve on the game. What's up with that, Nick?
Well, survival games always have that learning curve, right? Any good survival game is gonna give you that sense of, dropping you in the middle of this unfamiliar world with all these new crafting systems that you have to learn. And some games can be more unforgiving than others with the rule set of like what happens when you die. And Valheim is no stranger to that. When you go into the game, a procedurally generated world, much like Minecraft, is created. So you're getting a new gameplay, experience in terms of your surroundings every time. There's different biomes, different bosses that you can summon and fight. I think they said as of right now, there's like 5 or 6 major bosses in the game that you can go after as kind of the focal point of your goal. And, the big thing about this is that, looking at the gameplay, if you were to pull up some YouTube videos of this game right now, there's not going to be any kind of single hook or idea behind this that Valheim is done first, okay? The open world exploration, like I just said, Minecraft has that procedural generation, has been doing it for a long time. A lot of other games, I can think of like games like 7 Days to Die, where it's like a survival style game where, you go into a new world every time. And there's always that uncertainty of what your world is going to be like when you create it. What's really cool about Valheim, and I think when we talk about like, okay, why on earth is this game getting such an unbelievable amount of traction, especially for a paid game? And I think there's a couple of factors behind it. Number one, this is a $20 game.
Affordable.
Right out of the gate, people will pay $60 easily for a really good survival AAA experience. Which is not to say that the visuals and all that, this is early access. It's rough around the edges. Like some of the particle effects, you can tell have not been looked at in quite some time, and that's fine. I'm not criticizing it. It is what it is. You kind of expect that with these types of games. But I think that price point is really doing it a lot of favors to make it very easy to be like $20 and everyone's talking about it. Of course, I'm going to hop in and try it. Here is the crazy thing about this, Bruno.
Okay.
The install size of this game is, I think, just under 1 gigabyte. That's it. That's it.
No.
Yep.
Get out of town.
When you create these procedurally generated games, you don't have to have like a dedicated map in your files of what the game world is going to look right? And of course, a lot of, like I said, the shadows and the particle effects are kind of primitive, so it kind of helps pare down the size. I'm sure the final product, whatever that looks like, when it gets out of early access, will be a lot bigger. But you have such a huge advantage, and I saw a lot of people commenting on that, how they loved that they were able to buy the game and be playing it within like 1 minute, literally.
Wow.
Downloading and installing it. Yeah, so there's a lot of accessibility with it that I think comes with that territory as well.
That should be able to run on a potato, like a literal potato.
Well, I'm not really sure what the PC specs look like, in terms of how easy it is to run, but you would think so, right? It's not right. There's not a whole lot of muscle behind it, so... and like you said, the visuals kind of harken back to almost like an old school 3D MMO like EverQuest or World of Warcraft, kind of in its original days.
I didn't mind that pixelated look that it had. Like, it did have this pixelated look, but I think that's just a testament to art style and how everyone cries about graphics in the gaming community. We're all crying about the graphics need to be better, and that's not true. Graphics have reached a pretty good peak. There's not too much that we're gonna get out of graphics that we haven't already have gotten in terms of the polygons that are added to a character. So for example, and this is just for maybe our listeners who don't know exactly what I'm talking about, but all 3D characters are made up of a polygon or a 3D shape. And as time has progressed, there have been more points or vertices put in to these polygons to make them smoother and make them look more realistic in terms of the roundness or whatever. So we've gotten to a peak in terms of that, but ray tracing and lighting effects will always be the number one thing that differentiates a game in terms of really good graphics. So it's not just about, I think when people say, the graphics are really good, I don't think they necessarily mean detail of the shirt, and seeing the fabric or the pores of skin. We can get into that detail, but there's still a lot to be said from simple graphics like Fortnite or any type of art style that we see like Overwatch, and then throwing good lighting on there. We see so much of these different art styles that are emerging, basically kind of flipping the graphic thing on its head, saying not everything needs to be hyper realistic like Call of Duty. Let's just go ahead and make them look like Pixar characters, because that was my first thought when seeing Overwatch was is this Pixar? Did Pixar do a shooter? What's up?
It definitely looks like it when you look at the animations, like something that they would do.
Yeah. So, I mean, for this game to have that, and hit this interesting art style, I say go with it. Embrace it. Don't feel the need to go where the ball is in terms of trying to, or where it is currently going to what other people are doing, but instead try something new. Just and like we're going to talk about later on in the episode with the indie game spotlight that you had a great interview with, that you can do a lot with basic graphics, and it can still be immersive. So
here's the thing about Valheim that I think is really interesting is looking at the player count since the game released, I think around February 2nd of this month. So I mean, when you want to talk about just a whirlwind from going into early access, not release, but going into early access, that, I'm looking at a graph here on PCGamer.com about, how the actual number of players stacks up against Twitch viewers, because oftentimes with these types of games, a reason why the game goes viral is because a lot of people, especially big name influencers, start to pick up your game and start playing it on Twitch.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is around like the 7th of February, 8th of February, it starts to show where, the number of players and the number of Twitch viewers are rising. But then all of a sudden, the number of players just takes off into the stratosphere, going from like 100,000 to over 300,000 by itself, while the number of Twitch viewers kind of stays about the same at around 100,000.
Wow, I see that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really powerful piece of information to kind of understand how this game went viral, is that it's not just Twitch. It's able to survive on its own merit. And, I think that there is always going to be a market for a good survival game. People love this kind of stuff. There's nothing quite like the experience of getting dropped into a game like Rust or Ark or any of these survival type games for the first time, where you just have that brand new sense of wonder and fear of like, what do I need to do and what's going to happen to me in like the next 60 seconds if I don't, get it together.
Yeah.
And speaking to your point about graphics, we talked about this in a last episode. Justin from our QTB crew had talked about his frustration with the cost of PC parts. That problem has not gone away.
No,
and
not at all.
Right now, for a good like cutting edge graphics card, you're looking at easily a $2,000 price tag for just the graphics card. And the GPUs are expensive too, or the CPUs rather are expensive as well. So what used to be a thing where you could have $1,000 and put together not a bleeding edge computer, but a really good one that can support things like ray tracing and 4K display graphics. That now that's not even your 4-figure budget is probably not even going to be enough to get the graphics card. And because of that issue with the aftermarket and people trying to use it for things like cryptocurrency mining, I think there is definitely a demand for games that are easy to run, that offer really cool experiences that everybody can play together, since this is an online co-op experience. If you want to play with friends, you can create servers or even dedicated servers with up to 10 people you can play co-op with this on.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I think you're dead on. Like, don't worry about trying to, get all the buzzwords into your game. Honestly, Bruno, and this is just a personal rant from me, I am sick of hearing the word ray tracing. I really am. I understand, and I've seen it for myself what it does to a game in terms of the visuals. Mm-hmm. But I don't need to have, every single thing. It's always like, it's almost like a meme at this point.
It's always like Mario or something like that. Like Mario with ray tracing.
Mario
it's
64,
like, yeah, it's like that's not needed.
Right, like we're good. Yeah, like we loved the game as a kid, and I mean, it's interesting to see. It's like when people add VR onto a game, oftentimes it's like, okay, that's nice, but I'm happy with it the way it was. But
did you fix some of the bugs that were in the game that made it almost unplayable before? Like that's what we really want.
Exactly. So I think that it's very cool to see a game like this with where the shadow effects and all of the particle effects are, pretty rudimentary. But I'm really happy for these guys that they are able to see such. There's no way they were prepared for this kind of level of exposure, especially when, as far as I can remember, nobody was really talking about this game prior to its early access release. So to have that kind of meteoric rise, just like games like Among Us and games like Fall Guys, where now you have to, with whatever team you have, and it's probably not going to be a big one, you've got to have some very important meetings where the next step you take, the next move that you make, is every single move is so precious to capture that momentum and to make sure that people keep coming back to playing your game, and it's not just a fad that in a month or two you're going to be looking at the numbers and wondering, where did we go wrong?
Yeah, we'll be watching you. I thought you were going to break into a police thing, because you said every step you take and every move you make,
every game you play.
Yep.
That's a lyric.
Every game you play, we'll be watching you. And
you sent me an article also about that I think that is also worth kind of segging into, in that Valheim, is a very successful game, but much like any other game that's just plain hard or difficult in terms of how unforgiving the rule set is, a lot of people are getting in there and realizing, okay, like if I venture too far out and I have a bad day and one guy takes me out, you can get one shot in this game very easily. If you're not paying attention, or even if you are paying attention, that, now you've dropped all your stuff in a location you probably can't get back to. And it's so discouraging when that kind of thing happens. And there are a lot of people that are saying, like, the game is just too hard for them. I remember when Cuphead came out, Terry from QTB was talking about how he was really looking forward to playing the game. And he said, it's a very tough game. It's a boss rush, platforming nightmare. And the game came out, and he saw how difficult it was, and he was like, I'm not going to be able to. I don't think he ever bought the game, and he had been looking forward to it for a really long time, right?
That's a shame.
And so, I think that can be definitely something that can hinder you when you have a successful game that becomes notorious for its difficulty. You pick up a certain group of people that love that challenge, but I think oftentimes you can alienate more people than you attract at the end of the day. And I am curious to see how they address maybe new game settings or server settings where you can kind of ease up on the difficulty a little bit, maybe let you keep your stuff when you die,
Yeah. Well, to your point about the difficulty of games, I think that there's definitely a balance. Obviously, I have Cuphead. I played Cuphead. I didn't beat all the levels of Cuphead, and that to me was fine. There's a ton of games that I haven't beaten, but there are some levels within Cuphead that I worked really hard to beat, and it was so satisfying to finally beat it. And that is something that doesn't happen too often in gaming anymore. And I think that's what makes something like a battle royale game special, is that the odds of you winning, 1 in 100 essentially are it's a slim chance of you actually winning. So it makes those small instances of getting a victory royale, or whatever it may be called in your particular game, that much more rewarding. And so there's something to be said about the difficulty of a game like Valheim, and to know that if that's your goal, is to survive, then you might have to decide to run away instead of fighting. Like, in order to maintain the stuff that you have, or think twice about doing something before going into battle, and maybe reassessing, like old Leroy Jenkins style, in a big circle, and say, "What? Do a number crunch for me. What are we looking at?" Yeah, exactly. And I gotta say, to my point about recognizing, so apparently Valheim is a Viking thing, because it says 2 million Vikings on there. So kudos to me for recognizing, just out of the blue, that Valheim was a Viking name. I'm just going to pat myself on the back for that one, because go me.
Yeah, the game essentially takes place in like purgatory in like Norse mythology. Where you have to take out all these legends.
Nice. Well, who doesn't like Norse mythology? Like, that's really big right now too, with different series on Netflix, like Vikings, and Thor being obviously everyone's favorite Avenger. Who doesn't like Thor, right?
The Thor that kind of gave up there at the end of Dad Bod Thor.
Fat Thor to me. Okay, so this is an aside, but it was a great look at depression. I know everyone thought it was funny, but it was a great look at depression and what depression can do to someone. But I also liked it because it gave bigger guys like me a leg up in the cosplay world to be like, I'm going to embrace Fat Thor. Like, Fat Thor was awesome. And so, yeah, I mean, he pretty much looked like the dude.
He's Big Lebowski, straight up.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So that to me was a really cool thing to see, is because all superheroes are, you know, they have the superhero bods, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, that's what superheroes look like. But I want a thick boy superhero, not the Blob.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember that Marvel villain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was just like this giant, like amorphous, like blob that could bounce around. I remember fighting him once in like one of the Marvel video games and being like, seriously? But,
right,
I mean,
just a fat dude.
The comics, I mean, every gimmick you can think of has been covered at some point. But we'll be back in just a little bit, and we'll be talking more about, of course, those controller drift issues right after this.
You know, Nick, it seems like we're really in the golden age of podcasting. These days, you can find a quality podcast for just about any topic you can think of.
That's right, Bruno. And a big reason for that is the convenience and versatility of Anchor. It's the easiest way to make a podcast just like ours.
For sure. Anchor has built-in tools that let you record and edit your podcast from your computer or even your phone. And they even distribute your podcast for you automatically to Spotify, Apple Podcast, and more.
And not only is it 100% free with no strings attached, but you can start making money with your podcasts from day one. Literally everything you need for a successful podcast is all waiting for you with Anchor.
Just download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
All right, it is 6:54 in the morning somewhere out there, I'm sure. So, Nick, what do we got? There's some controller drift issues that I've heard about, only because it's plagued my news feed since they've been occurring. And it's something that you and I have dealt with since the N64 days. You know, remember turning on your Nintendo 64 and accidentally having the controller thumbstick, like the joystick, moved all the way to the left or the right, and then you turn on the game and then your character like permanently moved to the to the left.
Did you have that problem? Because I didn't.
What? Yeah, occasionally, yeah. So
wow.
It was one of those things where they told you don't start the controller like it you know, it may
in one direction.
Yeah,
right.
well, like holding any of the buttons or anything like that, because they might stick essentially in the game, and they definitely did. And it was always like, it was never in a helpful way. Like, oh, I can automatically move forward now. It was like, nope, I can run in a circle now for 6 hours and don't have to do anything. So yay to that.
I definitely got like Cheeto dust or something in like one of the button, like it was the C buttons. And so that kind of got, perma stuck on one. But controller drift is kind of its own thing, right? And this is why I wanted to bring this up, because so one of the big article that came out that I shared on Reddit and got a lot of interesting opinions from people is about this new class action lawsuit that's been filed against Sony about controller drift related to the PlayStation 5 DualSense controller. Just to be completely fair, because this is not a problem that is exclusive to Sony. That this is not about me saying, oh, let's just bring this article out so we can talk about how we hate Sony. Because there are ongoing lawsuits with both Nintendo and even Xbox right now for the same issue. Even Xbox.
It's got them all.
About controller drift. And I think it's a really interesting conversation, because the more that I heard people's opinions on it, and the more I kind of learned about the deep dive of hardware and maybe the reasons behind why this is happening, that I'm curious to get your take on, Bruno. So this lawsuit is basically saying that Sony's conduct is unlawful, unfair, yada yada, usual legal speak, in relation to the fact that these DualSense controllers are getting controller drift issues. Of course, a controller drift meaning it's a situation where your joystick is in a neutral position, but the game or the hardware thinks it's actually sending out a signal of, oh, move slightly left or move slightly up, or maybe even more than slightly.
Totally. Which
is, of course, causing your user interface or your game to register inputs that you didn't want.
Yeah.
And oftentimes this can happen just as a result of just scratching the surface, like the contact points, where the joystick makes contact and actually creates that electric signal of like, hey, this is the direction I want to go. Where if you treat these things like, arcade sticks, like you're playing Soul Calibur or something or an arcade, and just absolutely crushing these things, it's just a matter of time until you probably do some serious damage.
Definitely. Yeah. They're not going to last forever.
I think it's an interesting conversation point because, you and I as millennials, we have seen a lot of generations and a lot of iterations of controllers and what goes right and wrong with them.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting that you talk about, that you had some problems with Nintendo 64 controllers because, on the Nintendo side, right, that was the first controller that actually featured a joystick.
Yeah.
And that thing was rock solid for me. I never remembered having an issue. And I think the problem is everybody's experience is kind of anecdotal, right?
Yeah.
Everybody treated their controllers differently. Some kids were rage throwing it against walls. Some were, like I said, playing games like Mario.
Are you calling me out? No.
I mean, no, you didn't get that salty when you were playing games.
No.
I get that salty sometimes, but I never threw a controller. But I think I threw an NES controller a couple times, but NES games speak for themselves, and that thing was an absolute tank. Yeah, I mean, like I'm saying, like some people are playing games like Mario Party on the Nintendo 64 where you have to absolutely just demolish that joystick in order to play games where you have to spin it around as fast as possible. I go back and I think man, during my time playing the NES, the Super Nintendo, the Nintendo 64, even the PlayStation 1 and 2, I never had a single issue with controller drift. Not even once. And
wow.
Lord knows I put in the hours with those games and with those controllers. What's your experience been with controller drift?
It's always, to me, it comes towards the end of the life cycle of a controller for me. Mm-hmm. I know that there's a shelf life on these things, and I know the amount of time that I put into a game. So once the rubber starts to wear off of the joystick, I'm like, okay, maybe it's time to get a new controller. So to me, it's never been that big of an issue. I feel like the amount of wear has been directly equal to the amount of time that I've put into the controller. There's only a few times where I've felt like this broke way too soon, and that was with the previous Xbox Elite controllers that came out with the Xbox One. Those controllers, the actual L button and R button are made in a way that they pivot on a flimsy plastic piece, and I've broken two of them, two of the left bumpers. So that's the only terrible controller experience I've ever had, other than the fact that, I think as a millennial, we all had Mad Catz controllers as kids, and none of them ever worked. So those are the ones that you gave to your friends, legit. Yeah. They would come over, or well, first of all, you have to preface that your parents would buy these controllers for you. Right? You wanted, as a kid, we all wanted one of the color Nintendo 64 controllers, like the blue or the red. They had green, they had yellow. So that's what you wanted. You wanted one of those, but you'd settle for a gray one. That's fine. And then you get this monstrosity of a controller that looked nothing like the Nintendo 64 controller. Mm-hmm. It looked like an amorphous blob, like you're talking about. And it wasn't laid out the same, and nothing worked. Absolutely.
But at least it had a turbo button, Bruno. At least it had that.
What did that do, Nick? I still to this day have no clue what it did. It was
just like a rapid fire thing. A lot of controllers, back in the day, going as far back as the NES, when you would try and sell a deluxe controller, one of the features would be that you'd have a turbo button, right? Where you get if you press it, it'll rapid fire, the button that you're pressing. So if there's a game like Metal Gear Solid that has an event where you have to push a button as fast as possible, where you get an edge.
Ooh,
but it never served a practical purpose. But that was always your parents going in. They have the instructions, get me a new controller for Christmas. And of course, they're going to look at the $30, off-brand Mad Catz option that's always specifically designed to be in a location they can easily see and be like, oh, that's it. Of course, they're not going to get the $60 official hardware that's behind the counter. Like it's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, Andrew, this is just as good, okay? This is going to be just as fine as the other controller, and it's half the price. So I'm not going to pay for 2 controllers when I can get one at this price, okay?
Right. But even those, like, I don't remember those having any problems. And, Nintendo, though, I got to call them out here, Bruno, because between the 3 companies, right, Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo that are having these ongoing legal issues with controller drift, Nintendo, you botched it. I'm just going to say it outright, because the Joy-Con is not worth the price.
You done did it.
It just is not worth the price. It's a cheap piece of hardware that does not justify I think it's like $80 to get a pair of these things.
Ooh.
And I have had two instances of noticeable controller drift issues in my entire career of gaming. The first happened, and this is mostly my fault. With my Xbox One, I wanted to kind of get extra controllers so that we could play, party games with friends when they were over. So we had 2 controllers already that I bought new. So I went to GameStop and I got 2 refurbished controllers. Okay, my bad, because these things within like a day of using them started to get really bad controller drift issues.
Those are the ones that like some guy named Josh threw up against a wall for sure.
Yeah, definitely. That was a Call of Duty controller.
Yeah, that was a Call of Duty controller. Those are the refurbished controllers at GameStop.
Yeah. And I'm sure, like, 'cause I know in the past when I've traded in controllers, they have like something set up where they can quickly test like the joystick settings to make sure that there isn't an issue like drift and that all the buttons work. I guess what I'm saying is, I know that when you get a refurbished controller, it's supposed to go back to the manufacturer or to somebody, I guess, and they're supposed to fix any defects and then it comes back.
But this one went to a 15-year-old kid at GameStop who plugged it in for approximately 5 seconds.
Yeah, hit it with the canned air and said, refurb.
Good to go.
Yeah. Ship it.
Send her on her way.
Yeah. And okay, here I come walking in. La-di-dee, I'll take 2.
I'll take 2. This one looks new.
Yeah. But ultimately, they did. They got me. Well, no, I got to take those back because they were defective.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah, where you could see, like, these things were, like you said, were definitely at the end of their lifespan, and this, the actual problem wasn't addressed. But that was with hardware that I didn't buy new. But with the Nintendo Switch, I had major problems very early on, about a year or so after I bought it. And this is with light use, because oftentimes I would use a different controller other than the Joy-Cons. I usually use the Joy-Cons for mobile gaming. And all of a sudden I was playing Super Mario 3D All-Stars, and there it was, the Joy-Con drift started to happen. Now I'm lucky because I bought one of the original Switches. A lot of people had major issues, but I was able to do some basic fixes and some stuff I looked online to kind of try and work around it and manage to get it back into working order. But I know it's just going to be a matter of time until it happens again. But yeah, between the 3, Nintendo is by far the worst when it comes to just the low quality of hardware that they're putting out. If you hold a Joy-Con in your hand, Bruno, a single Joy-Con, and I say, what's this worth? There's no way you're going to be like, yeah, that's $40 for a single Joy-Con, right? You need 2.
Yeah.
In most cases, so it's going to be an $80 affair because you have to buy them in pairs.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Nintendo is making it somewhat easy to get it repaired, get it fixed. Of course, Sony is being a little more notorious with their shoddy business practices and making it difficult for a lot of people in the US especially to get it replaced. So hopefully, as a result of a lawsuit like this, that something happens. And the only other thing I'll say is class action lawsuits, they just don't help the little guy. It's reached the point now, especially after that credit agency, was it Equifax, that had the data breach, and everyone was a part of that class action lawsuit. And they ended up saying, well, you can take the cash option, but you're probably just going to get a couple bucks because so many people have signed up. Or you can get 5 years of free online identity monitoring. And it's like, okay, that's when I officially lost faith. Like if a massive credit score company like that can't be held liable for a number that actually puts money in the pocket of people affected, class action lawsuits only help the lawyers, guys. It's just that simple.
It's only going to benefit chemicals. Chemical Schwartz-Kreiner. That's the guy's name. The law firm of Chemical Schwartz-Kreiner and Donaldson Smith.
Where did you get these names, man?
That's the name of the guy. I'm adding that to the name of funny names because it says right here in the article. Last week, we reported on an investigation into DualSense drift by law firm Chemical Schwartz-Kreiner and Donaldson Smith.
Oh, no, wait, that's one name. Chemical Schwartz-Kreiner.
That's his name.
Listen, man.
This is the thing. That's why he became a lawyer, because he's going to sue and here we go. We're talking about it on the air. So it's a good thing that my lawyer, Humphrey Bojangles the third, is going to be able to come to my aid, because
there's nothing that would intimidate me. Like, who am I up against? Oh, they got chemicals.
We got Methuselah Honeysuckle.
Sounds like a Pokemon. Like a first evolution Pokemon, like the fire starter. It's chemicals. But, there isn't a whole lot to extrapolate on. I did think there was one interesting take that somebody had that I hadn't thought of, which is that, the idea of having L3 and R3 where you click in the sticks is something that has been around in gaming as early as like the PlayStation 1 when the DualShock controller was introduced, right?
Yeah, except the first time it told me to do that, I had no idea what in the hell I was supposed to do. L3 and R3. Yeah. I looked at the screen like
there's no button for it, like it's not labeled.
I'm sorry, but I don't know if you know what you're talking about, but there's no L3 and R3. Mainly because they used in the game that I was playing. I don't remember what one it was, but instead of using an icon of the joystick, they just used like the L button and then the 3, and you're like, is that a typo in the video
nowadays
game?
You know what that is, but back then it's like, I think you just made up a button. That's a nonsense button.
Nice try. It's like when kids say to hit like F5 or whatever it is, all F5 to quit out of a game.
It kind of got the juices flowing, because I'm thinking, okay, wait a second. Like, you think about the modern shooter game, right? And it's the left stick oftentimes will trigger like a sprint, right? And the right stick will trigger like a melee attack or maybe like a grenade toss, depending on your control scheme, where you really are using those buttons a lot more. And if a controller isn't built right to take that kind of abuse of being clicked in and out constantly, you have to wonder what kind of effect it had. One guy on Reddit said that starting with like his PS4, whichever one it was, that you had the paddles on the back, where he started assigning L3 and R3 to that and would never use them as intended in the game and click in the sticks, and he never had a problem with anything with like Joy-Con, or not Joy-Con, but controller drift after that. So one has to wonder, like, is clicking in these sticks constantly also a reason why whatever connector in there is getting scratched and worn down? But I also think there's probably some kind of, not malicious intent, but, them kind of maybe cutting corners on hardware. And in the case of Nintendo, definitely cutting corners.
Oh, for sure.
But with the other guys, it's tough to say. Coming up next, we have a great interview from the guys at DevHour Games. Bruno, I had a chance to sit down and talk with them a few days ago about a game that once again caught my eye called Loveland. So let's listen in on that now. And here we are with our next Indie Spotlight segment, where we're taking a look at some of the upcoming indie games that have kind of caught my attention during my my random ramblings through the Indie Games subreddit. And I am joined by a pretty dynamic team that I'm excited to kind of grill with some questions. These are the guys that are at DevHour Games. I'm joined by Nick Jones, the programmer, Chris Barakani, the designer, and Mark Liberto, the producer. Guys, how you doing?
Doing great.
Yeah, doing good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, definitely. And the game that we're talking about, I when I'm on Reddit looking at these trailers for indie games, everyone's got an idea or a hook or something unique. But I think you guys really are taking the cake with what we're talking about today. By far, the quickest I was sold on a concept, and that is a game called Loveland. Why don't you go ahead and explain what the game's all about?
Sure. Loveland is a low-poly immersive horror game in which you take on the role of the detective who works for the unnamed agency. Essentially, it is a horror game about frogs, namely the Loveland Frog. The detective and the agency are tasked with hunting down supernatural and cryptid creatures. And that's essentially what it's all about, is the detective attempting to figure out exactly what's going on in this trailer park full of frogs. Of course, I don't want to give out too much. A lot of the mystery is in the actual environment itself, you know.
Yeah, the important thing about this game from the outset was that we were pretty much trying to make a immersive, sim. We wanted it to be really focused, so we picked, trailer park. You don't see that much, and it's nice and tight, nice and focused, so we could really hone in on exactly who these people are.
And you mentioned the theme itself. Chris, you're the one that introduced it to me, Nick, as well. I was never familiar with the Loveland Frog. I was familiar with a lot of cryptid creatures, but the Loveland Frog is, it's got to be a super unique one, right?
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, because I guess that leads into my next question, which was, I guess there actually is a cryptid story. I was wondering, like, out of all the hooks of horror mystery games or just themes, the concept of a frog is so unique and so out there that just no one's doing. People are going for, like, arachnids or just like creepy crawlies or animals that have a kind of a creep factor to them. But a frog, this is kind of new territory, at least for me. So tell me more about the cryptid.
The whole idea to be doing something about cryptids was inspired from our artist, Bon. He originally had this idea where he wanted to go with an X-Files type scenario where you find supernatural creatures that aren't too out of the norm, that you would be more familiar with your typical urban legends. And so we were very intrigued by the idea of using a cryptid. So we immediately started, digging into the more well-known ones. We touched on the Flatwoods Monster, Mothman, and stuff like that, and we kind of bounced around between a lot of these cryptids until I think it was Bon himself just floated this frog. He's like, "Hey, you ever heard of the Loveland Frog?" And we're like, "No." And we just took a look at the article, and all the information that's out there in the Wikipedia pages and stuff, and it was just so absolutely bonkers, the idea of a 4 foot tall frog that stands on its hind legs, reported to have used magic to attack people. And you're right, we had never heard of anything like that in our entire lives. It's incredibly far-fetched, and we just had to.
Yeah, it was too weird not to dive into. Like, what would that be? What how could we make that scary? And that was really the question. The best thing about the Loveland Frog is really what's not said about him. Like, there's very little information about it as a myth, as a story. But what is there is really, I don't know. It's just really fun, and it's weird.
Yeah, I would have to imagine that if there was a podcast about cryptids, which, nowadays is a podcast about everything, that the Loveland Frog would be way, way later in the show. Like, you've gone through all the big ones. But yeah,
Definitely.
just frogs by itself is such a cool hook, I think, as a game. Hey, it's a horror game about frogs. I think that was the title of your Reddit post, where I'm like, okay, I'm in,
yeah.
I'm in. Tell me more. You had me at frogs. But yeah, and speaking of which, another thing that definitely kind of drew me in is that retro style that you have in the game. Obviously, the filters that you're using in the game kind of give it that PSX style, PlayStation style. What are there any games in particular that have influenced you guys in the PlayStation 1 era to make this game?
To talk about the visuals in the game, we'd actually have to go back to its original inception. A lot of people may not know this, but this Loveland was actually originally created as part of a game jam. We signed up for 2 game jams simultaneously. One was the haunted PS1 Summer of Screams jam, and the other was the 64 by 64 low res jam, which essentially you made a game within 64 and 64-bit graphics. And we kind of saw this opportunity where, what if we made a PS1 styled game that we could then downgrade to a 64 by 64. And then from there, we kind of looked at a lot of PS1 games that had that kind of influence, stuff like Resident Evil, Dino Crisis. Echo Knight by From Software played a little bit of part in the way we wanted to frame some things as well. But in reality, we tried to go with the PSX style, but there are some things, that we personally don't enjoy too much in that styling, vertex snapping, texture warping, and stuff like that. We did opt not to include that kind of stuff because we feel it, while it is, more traditional when it comes to PSX style games, we found that this gave it more of an actual atmosphere. It made it much more aesthetically pleasing and not too cookie cutter among all the other PlayStation style games we have out there.
It's a very subjective thing, but in our opinion, pretty much, like, we have access to shaders that other people have written. We could put it in there if we wanted to, but it's one of those things. You don't just use every tool you have just because you have that tool. We thought that we respect PS1, PSX style games, but we're not purists about it. We're not setting out to make a PS1 game in particular. We just love the way PlayStation games looked, and we want to call back to that while also keeping it, fresh and using the parts that we really love, like dithering and color correction.
Oh, the color correction's fantastic. Some of those features, like we said, it's just it really helps sell the atmosphere so much, and it's just something really creepy about it. It really works out.
It's this mysterious kind of screen you have to view the world through, and we didn't start off with a huge art team, so it really helps set the tone, and maybe it could be seen as even lazy, but honestly, like, it's one of those things. It just works. It really does set the tone, and players really do feel it and vibe with it. So, and at the end of the day, that's our job as people that make entertainment, is to make them feel something.
And I have to say, as far as how a PlayStation 1 style game can really add to the horror experience of something, especially in first person where you kind of have a loss of sense of what's around you, I think, yeah, you definitely nail that aesthetic and just the raw appearance and the nature of the way that a pixelated game like that appears, and kind of that first foray into home 3D experiences, that, yeah, you just get a sense of unease that I think is very hard to recapture nowadays, but I think you guys are definitely onto something with how you portray it.
Oh, absolutely. And there's nothing felt scarier than back when, you were walking through that house in Resident Evil 1 and the zombie pops out out of the cupboard. It's stuff like that certain unease that just isn't matched nowadays. I completely agree with you on that.
The dog's what got me.
Oh, the dogs. I think everyone got hit by the dogs.
Okay, and my next question, you did allude to this earlier, but I have to press you a little bit more, and maybe it ties into the cryptid story more than I'm aware of. But I have to go to the comment in one of the playthroughs of your game on YouTube that made me laugh out loud. That was, someone said, "Finally, a horror game that takes place in the most terrifying place of all, Ohio." So I have to wonder, not just Ohio, because obviously you said that kind of ties into the cryptid itself, but what on earth made you decide to go with a trailer park?
What's scarier than a trailer park in the middle of night in the middle of Loveland, Ohio? I grew up in trailer parks most of my life, and they just are not well represented in video games. I'll say that.
And they're a very unique place to be.
Yes. You're usually isolated away from the world. The most you might hear of civilization is a distant highway roar.
The community in a trailer park is usually really close knit. People know each other. People know their comings and goings. They know what they do. They know what they like. They talk often, things like that.
Yeah, and it's just a really grimy scenario, and it just plays to it kind of well. There's nothing, like I said, there's nothing scarier than walking through a trailer park in the middle of the night. It just has this eerie vibe to it.
There's this mundanity to it, that you walk in and you're like, it's a trailer park in America, but like, what is more American than a trailer park.
Gotcha. And yeah, and I think that just the combination of frogs and the location and the trailer park, really come together. Like I said, that it caught my eye when I was looking through, all of these upcoming indie game trailers. So yeah, I mean, I think it's all going to come together to create a really cool horror experience. And a lot of the indie studios that we've looked at so far on the podcast, they're pretty focused in terms of the kind of games that they're putting out. But looking at your page, man, you guys have a unique mix of games. We're talking a unique take on Picross, I think it's called, or Picross with depixation. Picross, yeah, depixation.
And depiction, correct.
Depiction, there you go. Yeah, and also a Doom 2 mod that literally puts you inside your recreation of the National Video Game Museum in Texas. So I have to wonder, with all of these different ideas, what causes you as a studio to want to create such a wide variety of genres?
The easy way to put it would be our slogan, we make games that we want to play.
And we also have ADD.
Yes. It's what a bunch of people with ADD want to play all the time. It's whatever really we make games because we love to make games. We want to play the things that we come up with. We have these crazy ideas, and it might just be a weird puzzle game, or this one might be a horror game about frogs, and the next one might be a first-person shooter. We really don't limit ourselves on what we want to create, because we really do want to create anything. I mean, we have some plans in the future to create like rock crushing simulators. In our previous life, we've actually done flood management simulators. We've literally made just about anything you could imagine, and we're just going to continue to do that. We don't like one particular type of game. We love everything.
Yeah, if you see our game libraries, we're playing everything from JRPGs to RTSs to grand strategies, first person games, everything. We love it all. Tabletop games, D&D. At the end of the day, making games is as fun or more fun than playing them. We just a few months ago, whenever we started the 64 by 64, low res jam, we got in a room and we said, "What if?" And we came out with, "What if this trailer park is taken over by the Loveland Frog that has the ability to take over their minds, slowly over time, and there's some crazy stuff in Loveland that people are going to see." And those were a bunch of what ifs, and they were all met with yeah, and just excitement. And that's what happens when you feel good at something. It makes you feel smart, to come up with these systems and make people happy, and it's fun.
It really is.
It's the best job on the planet.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, it's so evident that you guys have not only the passion, but a clear vision, that it's literally in your slogan, that it's not just about one idea that became something. It's more about a concept and a principle behind what you're making. So yeah, this is sounding awesome. From what I got to see a full playthrough of the demo that you have available, and I'm sold. I'm definitely there whenever this comes out. So yeah, thanks guys so much for coming on, and make sure if you are interested in learning more about what these guys have to offer, you can stop by their website. That is DevHourGames.com. If you'd like to wish list this upcoming game, Loveland, on Steam, also you can check the description for the podcast, and that'll take you right on over. And yeah, Chris, Mark, Nick, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Wish you the best of luck with this and all of your future endeavors.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. One thing I'd like to say is definitely give us a wish list, because what you've seen so far barely scrapes the iceberg about what's going to happen in the full game. Trust us on that.
I did see that Nick Cage picture that you submitted. Can you guys book him? He's doing just about anything these days.
I've got Nick Cage on the other line. I put him on hold for this, so I should get back to him.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for coming on, and good luck with Loveland.
No problem. Have a great one.
And we're back. It's 8:57 at night, somewhere
fast.
out there. Yeah, man. I'm time has flown by.
It was just 7:00 in the morning, like 15 minutes ago.
So, wow, what an amazing interview that was. First of all, they mentioned Mothman, which actually hits home. So the whole idea of this cryptid type horror game definitely hasn't really been done. I guess Slender Man kind of turned into a cryptid type of character, but going reverse from stories such as the Loveland Frog Man, which is a thing. Nick, you can look this up. I kid you not. It's got a whole Wikipedia page, and there's an artist rendering of the size of the frog and everything. And love this. First of all, this totally sounds like the type of story that would come out of a place like Loveland, Ohio. Like the fact that there's a giant man frog that does magic is just something that you'd hear at like Sheetz. Or
Sheets.
you're just going in to get your MTO, your made to order sandwich, grab some Funyuns and a Mountain Dew, and here comes Joyce right in the door, Crazy Joyce from down the street, and she's talking about
she's been seeing that frog.
Yep, she's been seeing that frog man again, and it does the magic, I swear, it does magic. And you're just like, oh, Joyce, seeing those frogmen again.
Yeah.
Give me a pack of that Orbit gum over there,
Marlboro
Bob.
Light Ultras. Give me my Newports.
Give me my Newports and we're out of here. Okay. So, that's the type of story that you'd expect. But they mentioned Mothman, which actually hits home for us because we are West Virginia natives, and that is our resident cryptozoological animal. So that was exciting. I loved the art style. It looked like Hello Neighbor meets Slender Man.
A little bit, yeah.
It had that Slender Man vibe where you're figuring out what's going on within this area, and it had that Hello Neighbor type art feel where it was primitive but still engaging in a stylistic way. And it reminded me of VHS with that overlay screen that you guys were talking about. I don't know what
that filter.
Yeah, that like filter. It just gave me like a VHS. I definitely had an X-Files vibe to it. It definitely felt like that. And they're right. There's nothing scarier than a trailer park in Ohio, except a trailer park in West Virginia. That's the only thing scarier.
The more I thought about it, the more I'm like, wow, they're right. Like, not only did they come up with a great idea for this cryptid that's been out there that anybody could have made a game based off of.
Yeah.
And the horror genre has been done to death at this point with different unique takes and monsters that, you have to learn about as you go through. They really stumbled onto gold with this because, like I said, as far as we know, no one's done anything with the Loveland Frog before.
Yeah, totally.
And a trailer park is not really like a scene that you see in any kind of game. They're totally right. Like, it is not represented. The only game I can immediately think of, and I've got a pretty wide range of experience over the days with just different weird types of games. There was a MS-DOS shooter, or like a Windows 95, I don't know what it was, but it was called Redneck Rampage.
Oh yeah, the classic. Everyone that was on everyone's list, Christmas list.
Yeah, I mean it was everyone's favorite, but it was basically just Doom, but with Billy Bob, going through and you got your sawed off shotgun and you're taking care of business like some demons invade your trailer park. But yeah, it was a really cool interview. The guys were really awesome, and it's a very unique idea. The studio and their idea of let's make games that we want to play, rather than, let's just come up with one idea for a game and that's it. Like I said, these guys have such a wide range of the games they've already put out, spanning across different genres. But as they revealed in the interview, like other games in the future that they're looking to create that are crazy, like, rock simulators and that kind of thing, of just like, these guys, I mean, I would love to be a fly on the wall when these guys are sitting together and talking about what their ideas are going to be for a new game. And I'm really looking forward to seeing more because as that interview kind of teased, it sounds like things are going to get pretty crazy pretty fast after what we were able to see in the demo.
Yeah, and I could definitely see this spinning into multiple episodes of where this character figures out this story behind the Loveland Frog, and then maybe they do go on to learn about Mothman or some of the many other cryptids out there like Sasquatch, or we have something called Colossal Claude here in Oregon. I don't really know what that is. And
okay, maybe for the next chapter, they can have, like, once you find out all the information about it, maybe the protagonist goes on like the Maury Povich show with his findings. You know?
Oh man, that would be a great follow-up too. Just like a great cutscene like they have in F1 where you do those like short little interviews. Yeah. Just in between is you just interviewing at the Maury Povich show. Right. And maybe that could be the whole premise of the game. Just like Maury Povich sends you out on these, you know, you're on his street team. Street team.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to be a part of our street team, you can always hit up quitthebuild.com and check out our community page where we have tons of awesome gaming merch. We have a new Keep Calm and Quit the Build t-shirt that was just uploaded up on there. And there's links to all of our social media, to Instagram, to YouTube, to our Discord channel. So by all means, be sure to head on over to quitthebuild.com where you can get all that amazing stuff and more, some awesome blog articles. We've got more coming down the pipeline. This has been a great episode, Nick. What do you think?
Yeah, you know, the website has just been getting cooler and cooler by the day. And like I said, the blog has a little bit of something for everybody. It's such a cool mix of gaming and 90s nostalgia and of course beer with our newest article. And I'm telling you, like, you know, if you are a millennial like us, this is the kind of content that you're going to love because we're passionate about it and we're it's the stuff that we want to talk about and the stuff that we love. So we know that you'll probably like it as well. And hey, if you're an indie developer and you have a game that is coming up or has released recently and you would like to be featured in our Indie Spotlight segment, you can send us an email there at quitthebuild@gmail.com and we'll get in touch with you and everything lines up. We'll be able to hopefully get you on a future segment to kind of let you showcase to the world what you got going on. We'd love to do it.
Definitely. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening and for tuning in. It has been a blast. I enjoy it every time. And every time we gain another listener out there, it really does mean a lot to us. So we appreciate you, our listener, and everyone out there that helps us make Quit the Build run, from all the people that submit articles and all these amazing indie developers who are just coming at us with great games and giving us something to talk about. Thanks so much. We will be back again this Saturday with a new episode. For Nick, I'm Bruno.
And for Bruno, I'm Nick.
Peace out. What it do?